Okay, so today we go into the last part of the book of Job. Um, and this is the most difficult part. um, I really enjoyed, however, your responses. I was reading them just now and they are amazing. You guys are really getting it. This is like one of my best classes. Some of you are really sensing the absurdity of the epilogue, right? A lot of you were like, why does he give him back twice as much? Like, what? Why are we going back to square one, right? A lot of you are noticing, and this is good. You guys are really getting it. Why is the epilogue just like the prologue, right? Why are we back to square one? We're going to talk about that, right? A lot of you are pointing out the unsatisfactory answer that God gives Job, right? Of course, I'm going to ask you in a second how many of you liked it, how many of you didn't like it, but a lot of you had some issues with it, and you're seeing correctly, right? So very good. So excellent reading assignments, everyone except, let's see, I mean, not in terms of content, but in terms of double space. Arshad, are you here? Arshad, where is Arshad?
I'm here.
Ah, there you are. Arshad, please single spaced your reading assignment, not double spaced.
All right.
Content was great, just the format, okay? Good. Now, a couple of you are still mad at God based on the prologue. Will you stop it? Right? One of you mentioned, how could God sacrifice Job's children, right? Now, let me ask you, is this the God that the author is trying to, right? The God who sacrifices Job's children, which is the God of the prologue, is this the God that the author is going to talk to us about? Yes or no? Let me hear the whole class. No. Okay. Whatever God we have in the prologue, whatever this crazy God is doing, you know, doing wagers, right? Playing with the devil, playing with Job's destiny, destroying all the children, right? This is the God of the prologue. And remember, this is not the God that the book of Job wants us to encounter, right? We're going to encounter him today, but this isn't the prologue, that's not it, right? This is the God as viewed by the ancients, right? The ancients believe, right, in this way, that God played around with our destinies, that he could just, you know, wipe out anything he wanted just on a whim, right? So be careful. If I see this in the test, it's not going to go well, right? I cannot find, you should not be basing your theology, right? Let me write down this word theology so you all know what I mean, right? Theology is discourse about God, right? From theos, which means God in the Latin, right? And logos, which means discourse, right? So your discourse on God, right? Your perspective on God, whatever you say on God, your theology cannot be based on the prologue. We know this already, right? This is not the author's view. Okay, am I clear? Put your hand on the screen if I've made my point. Okay, great. I love seeing all your hands like that. That's nice. Okay, great. All right. So today's difficult. Today's difficult. I'll tell you why. Because it's very subtle. And to be honest, I've taught this book for years, and still only about a third of the class gets what I'm doing, what I'm going to try to say today. So each time I try to say it better. So I'm gonna ask you today to pay particular attention, right? And write down whatever I'm writing in the chat. It's very important for you to follow, right? Because it's subtle, it's difficult, as are the wisdom books in the Bible, right? In case you haven't noticed, the wisdom books in the Bible are not for the faint of mind, right? These are difficult books. Stylistically, they're literary works, they're profound, they're complex. It takes a certain intellectual level, I think, to really get what they're saying. The rest, you know, if you don't have too much of an intellectual level, you can read the 5 books of Moses, you can read the prophets, right? But these books were really written for people who are thinking more, their mind is more incisive, right? So the book is that the books are actually difficult for the mind. They're really substantial food for the mind. So it's, of course, there's an easy way to read them, but if we really want to get to the how the author meant them to be read, it's difficult, right? So today is actually, it's one of the most difficult classes, right, for all of the semesters. So are you guys ready for this? Put your hand in the screen if you're ready for one of the most difficult lectures, and hopefully more than a third will understand this time. Okay, So remember the question I asked you to work on last time, which is whether you were satisfied or not with God's answer. So let me take a poll. How many of you were satisfied with the answer? That was a great answer. Nobody? Nobody's going to give God a break? Ah, Arshad, thank you. Arshad liked the answer. That's it? Nobody else liked the answer? Okay, Agurto, thank you. Another courageous soul. So 2 people like the answer? Okay, how many didn't like the answer and thought that was laying? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those of you who are not voting, what's going on? Black man, Suresh. Suresh, you're raising your hand. Okay, Black man, what's going on? Who are you? Which camp are you on? Which side?
I guess I'm more so not satisfied.
All right, very good. So we have a majority of dissatisfied people. And by the way, you're not alone. The Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel, in case you, how many of you know this guy, Elie Wiesel, who wrote the famous book, The Night? Let me see your hands if you know this guy. Okay, he's from New York. Well, not from, but, but he ended up here. He's a Holocaust survivor, right? Very incisive reader of the Bible, right? And he actually finds the book of Job disturbing, right? And he wrote a whole, I forget which book, but he talks about how this is a completely dissatisfactory answer. And you guys are going to tell me a little bit why. But for sure, you have this guy on your side, right? He's really not satisfied with the answer. He thinks God is brushing Job off, and that Job, in a way, kind of just, you know, shuts down, right? Because of the way God answers. So let's hear some of you guys who hate the answer. Let's hear why. Let me get an idea of why you didn't like that answer. So it's the majority, so I'm expecting to hear several of you right now. Okay, Williams, go ahead.
I believe it went against what we were saying in the first class, how, well, I had said he was spoiled and he was, bratty and just whining. And like, God just gave him 2 times the rewards, even though he's acting really bratty and whiny. So I felt like it went against our opinions, and I felt that our opinions just didn't correlate with what God was thinking. And then the fact that he punished the people that believe him and believe that he's a complex person and he does everything for a reason, it was kind of like, why would you punish them? Like, I get, they didn't question who he is, but at the same time, they're your believers. They're going to believe everything you say about them, and they're going to adjust it.
Okay, good, Williams. Let me limit, however, your answers to just God's answer, his discourse, right? We'll get to the epilogue and then come back, Williams, with those issues, because that's a separate section, the epilogue. But just with regards to the way what God is saying, Williams, is there anything you want to add with regards to how God responds in his discourse to Job?
Oh, he responds with what he actually does and what Job can't do, like how he can create oceans, he can summon people and all that, and that's something Job can't do, and he's complaining on everything God does, when it's like, I do so much more than you can do, and you're complaining about the things I can't do for you specifically.
Oh, okay, so God is kind of broadening Job's perspective. You seem to be liking the answer.
Oh, definitely not.
Oh, it sounds good though, what you just said, that God is broadening Job's view. This is good, no?
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so you're on the other team, Williams. Okay, let's see. There's a few more. Varghese, Subonkulova, and Harkstark, in that order.
So God's response was not. I don't want to say make sense, but it actually didn't. Because talking from God's perspective, from Job's perspective, he already knew he was a believer, right? He was a spiritual man and he knew God and he praised God. And I think he already knew how great God is, that he is the creator, he did everything. And I didn't see the reason why God had to repeat himself, like, okay, I did this, I did that, I am great. And it just didn't make any sense. It didn't go with what Job had experienced. And as much as I tried to to make sense of what God said. It just didn't connect to what Job had experienced. So
Okay,
that's why it didn't make sense. Yeah.
excellent. Okay, let's put that first thing, right? This is Vargas, right? God doesn't answer. He goes off, right? He doesn't answer Job's question, which was, why am I suffering, right? Why are you torturing me? He goes off into some tangent, right? And things that Job already knows, right? I don't need to be reminded, God, that you're powerful and great. So he seems kind of like off topic. So that's the first issue, right? Very good. Who is the next one? Subhankulova, Harkstark, and then Wrestler again.
Hi. I just want to say I agree with what Jody said. Like, he doesn't answer Job. He just says all the power he has. He doesn't say what he sins or what his sins were, but gave him double. I'm surprised, like, why he still blessed him, because in other religions, or I don't know, cultures, we're supposed to show God a loyalty, not ask questions and obey. And, like, for example, we have to pray and fast, but he doesn't do any of those. He doesn't have a personal, strong connection with God, but God still blesses him with a lot of stuff.
Okay, we'll come to that, right? A lot of you are trying to ooze into the epilogue. Not yet, right? Just focus on the words. But we will answer your question, Subhankulova. We'll get there, right? But so do you have anything in the discourse of God, in his words, that you thought was problematic?
He doesn't answer him. He just talks about his creations, and he compares himself and Job and says he doesn't matter. He's just a small, like an ant or a speck in all of his creation. Okay. And there's other things that matters other than him.
Very good. So we can add this, right? So not only he doesn't answer him, but he demeans him, right? Makes him small. Like, who are you, right? That I should worry about you. Who are you that I should, right? In the big scheme of things, right? In the big scheme of things. This can be good or bad, by the way, right? But in a way, he kind of brushes him off. Like, what are you, speck in the universe that I have created? I'm busy here with, the lions and the turtles, and what are you, right? Entering my, right? So very good, very good. Let's see. Let's have a couple more. Harkstark and Wrestler.
So I totally agree that, like, God's response doesn't really seem to make any sense. Like, he is basically is saying that he is, like, all powerful and amazing, like this whole different, like, being, and, like, that Job doesn't understand. Like, he's just a human. He's worthless. He doesn't understand that at all. But, like, so yeah, obviously that doesn't answer it. And above that, it's like, it doesn't, even like, not only does it not answer it, it also doesn't teach him anything, because he was right that he didn't do anything wrong, and then God is saying, like, but God's basically saying, you don't know that you didn't do anything wrong, but, like, you didn't do anything wrong. So, like, there's no purpose for it, even if it's like, not only is it not answering the question, it's also just, like, doesn't seem like there's any reason for it.
Okay, very good, right? I've added in the chat some of your comments, right? God is boasting, and he's full of, I don't want to say full of shit, but that's kind of the idea. He's not saying anything, right? Very good. Last one before we go, because I have to continue. Although make it really short. If you guys can take 1 minute each, I can have all three of you, which is Wrestler and Rivera, all two of you, sorry. Wrestler, go ahead, and then Rivera. Really short, so that I can...
Right. I guess, like, going along with a few of the things that, like, people had said before, it seems as though God is trying to teach Job, like, humility, but, like, that's what he kind of wants Job to gain from this experience, and then, like, be able to, like, give that along, like, go, like, out back into the world and, like, teach that to other people. But he's, like, being haughty in teaching him that he should be humble. So it just, like, doesn't feel like a proper, like, way to teach Job that lesson.
It's an arrogant way to teach humility, right?
And especially if he wants then Job to go on to be able to teach
because of his like newfound wisdom of humility, he definitely doesn't know how to teach it then if he's being taught like through the other, like through God's being haughty.
Okay, very good. Excellent. I have to skip the last one because I'm running out of time, and I told you this is difficult, so I'm going to need time to develop this. So let me skip the last one, the few of you left with your hands up. So we've seen the cons, and indeed, right, it's true, right? God seems to be besides the point. His tone is problematic. He's in a way very boastful, arrogant. He's in a way also very aggressive. Make sure you add that, right? He's also quite aggressive. I mean, you have to remember, Job just lost everything. He's completely destroyed. And God comes on the scene and just like a tornado, right? And finishes him off, literally, right? When you're done with the text, you have Job kind of, very meek, very mousy, right? Saying, go to page, let's see how Job reacts. Look at page 88. Are you all there? Page 88? Let me see if your hand is there. Put your hand in the screen if you're on page 8. Right, look at Job's response, right? Oh, I know you can do all things. Nothing you wish is impossible. I've spoken of the unspeakable. Therefore, I'll be quiet, comforted. There's a way to read this that Job in a way has shut down. Right? When you're being aggressed, it's kind of like God breaks his spirit and he just gives up, Job. And this is, by the way, Elie Wiesel's interpretation, right? He says God in a way shut Job down, and Job in a way just gives up. He gives up on the discourse, on the dialogue, on the possibility of a connection. So this is certainly, right, this whole line of interpretation that we've just developed works, right? Absolutely, you can go away from the text with these questions. And by the way, I know Alim had her hand up, but I'm going to say something she said in the reading assignment, right? There's something interesting in a book finishing like this on, we don't know, even God can't answer, there is no answer, right? And in a way, there's something comforting in a book being that authentic, right? Really authentic enough, is sincere enough to really say things as they are, not trying to, polish things or make things look better. So this is kind of a book in the Bible which is not putting on a show, right? Very real. There's no answer. Even God doesn't know, right? So you can totally leave the class with this interpretation and I'll be fine with that, right? Now, I do want to offer an alternative interpretation based also on the text, right? But for this, you have to, in a way, learn to read between the lines, right? In other words, what God is saying is in a way giving us not so much the words as the energy of what he's saying is saying something. Okay, but that didn't make any sense. Let me continue. I told you this is going to be hard. So what I'm going to try and show is that there is an answer that God is giving, but it's not the answer we were expecting, right? And so I'm going to lead you into this study, into this way of reading between the lines of God's discourse so as to get to what God is really trying to say, what is really being said, right? So let me say that again, right? God is speaking, but something is being said between the lines, beyond just the words, right? Okay, so first of all, before we can get into who God is, right? What he is saying about himself, we have to remember who God was in Job's eyes in the prologue, okay? Then we can really, Job had a certain vision of God in the prologue, which in this discourse is being changed, right? That's the main thing. First thing I want you to remember, right? So make sure you write this down, right? Job had a certain vision of God that we see in the prologue, the way he acts with God, which in this discourse is being completely reversed, right? In other words, what the author is doing is moving us away from the type of God that Job was serving in the prologue to a new revelation. So what we have in this passage, in my interpretation, is a new vision of God that Job did not have. And this is what Job learns in the process. For the one of, I think it was Cohen, who was like, or Hart Stark, sorry, who was like, what did he learned, right? So there is a revelation and there is something new happening in this discourse, okay? But before we can see that, we have to go back to the prologue. So let's do that right now. Turn back with me to the prologue, where he's on page 5, right? He's where they describe Job, and then the next page, page after, when there's, where's this thing with the children? When the children have a feast. Yeah, this is all on page 5, right? Okay, so based on page 5, let me make sure you're all there. Are you all on page 5? So remember, we're going to the prologue to figure out who God was, to then move into the God's response to see who God really is, okay? According to the author of the book of Job. Okay, if you look at the prologue, what type of God do you see there? I see 3 characteristics. How would you describe the God of the prologue? Let me hear you on this. Subankulova, is that an answer to this question, or is that an old raised hand?
No, sorry, that was someone else.
Before. Okay. All right, God of the prologue. Let me help you. The God of the prologue, is he a God, you think, who, you know, how is this God dealing with mistakes? How does this God of the prologue react if a mistake has been committed, based on what you're seeing here, based on Job's behavior? Watch this, right? The children of Job have a party. The next day, Job is like, what is he doing? A big sacrifice, just in case they made a mistake in the party, right? Just in case they sinned, they drank too much and they did something stupid, right? So he's making, what does this tell you about the God of Job of the prologue? What does this tell you? What is his level of tolerance to mistakes and sins? Okay, let's see. Let's have Williams, go ahead.
Sound like he's unforgiving and strict.
Okay, very good. Okay, so make sure you write this down. This is the first, right? That we're doing the God of the prologue. First thing we learn about the God of the prologue, the way that Job perceives God in the prologue, is that he's strict, right? He is narrow-minded, rigid, right? Rule-abiding. This is the type of God we have, right? Very concerned with our sins, right? Very meticulously looking at a sin. Boom, let me write it down. Boom, let me throw some, thunder and lightning on you, right? The karma immediately. Good, that's the first, certainly, first vision. Anything else? Harkstark.
I just think that's actually a really interesting interpretation, because you could very well say the opposite, that he perceives God as forgiving, and that's why he's always asking him for forgiveness, because he knows that God will listen to him and that God wants to forgive him.
Yes, God forgives, but he's also very attentive to our sins.
Yeah, but we didn't say he wasn't attentive. He could be attentive and also forgiving and not strict.
Okay, I'm going to add then addition, right? So he is, forgiving, but still, right, keeps record, right? He's still keeping record. He's still watching, right, that there is some issue. But you're right. That works too. Subankulova, anything else you want to add? Subankulova? Are you there?
Sorry, I didn't realize the hand was.
Yes, put down your hand. Okay, Rivera, go ahead.
It also seems in the beginning that he, in my interpretation, that he's very confident in his followers, and that he, in the prologue, it sounds like when he makes a deal with Satan, he's like, well, he's not gonna scorn me and hate his faith after this. He's gonna keep following no matter how much you make him suffer. He sounds very confident in his followers, but in a way where it's cocky, where he's like, he's not gonna stop. Like, look how much he's already done. He's gonna keep going, even if he's like, as long as you don't kill him, but you can make him suffer as much as you want. It doesn't matter. He's gonna keep going.
Okay, very good. I would add to that. So this is a God who brings on, right, suffering. This is a God who is, right, the source of pain in Job's life, right? And in fact, Job himself says that, right? Throughout when Job is speaking, he's like, why are you doing this to me, right? So we see there that God, in a way, is a God, right, who is the source, right, of pain, death, suffering. Good. Last one I'm going to add myself. This is this notion of the predictable God, right? In other words, This is a God that if you sin, you're cursed, at least in the prologue, right? And then if you do good, you're blessed, right? This is the God of the prologue before everything goes bad, right? So these are the three, right? You can get a sense just from this page 5, right? This, how Job perceives God, right? Number one, he perceives him as narrow-minded, although forgiving, but still very strict, right? If you don't do the sacrifice, no forgiveness, right? What if you forget to do the sacrifice? Then, you know. Second one we saw, right, that I wrote down is this is a God who, in Job's own words, right, brings on the death and the suffering and the destruction. And finally, this is a God who is, in a way, predictable, right? There is a system that Job seems to know how to navigate in the beginning, right? There's a system. God, if I do good, I'll be blessed, right? We see that. If I do bad, I'll be cursed, right? Okay, so remember, this is not the God that our author wants us to remember. He's moving away from this view, which, by the way, a lot of us have of God, right? Just look at these 3 points and ask yourself if you are not actually right now believing that God, in a way, is narrow-minded and rigid, that he is, you know, kind of predictable, and finally that he's the source of your pain, right? A lot of us actually still see God like this, right? Milgram, do you want to add something?
I just have a question. Is it God who brings on the suffering and pain, or is it the adversary? Like, I thought we were making a distinction between them.
So remember, the adversary disappears. And remember, this is not who God is. This is how Job perceives God, right? And so whoever is bringing in the pain, Job is clearly perceiving the pain as coming from God, right? So this is not who God is in the prologue. This is how Job perceives God. Does that answer your question, Milgram?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's move into the discourse and see what we see there. Okay, now here's how I'm going to proceed. And this is the part where I lose everyone, because I'm going to proceed in a way which is, this is a way to read the text, which is literary. In other words, I'm going to be attentive, not just the words, but the overall portrait of God that emerges from his words. Okay, so in other words, let me explain this. Make sure you guys are listening right now, because this is really important, right? In other words, what is happening is God is saying a lot of things, but as he is speaking, a portrait of who God is emerges from his words. In other words, the way he describes nature, the way he describes the animals, the way he describes the universe says something about him. So that's how I'm going to read the text. I'm going to see what in this tells me something about, right? Since God is the creator, however, the way that he's describing his creation reflects who he truly is as the creator. And this, I think, is the revelation that is taking place, right? So through all of this kind of, you know, beautiful painting that he's making of the creation, you can get a sense of the character or the personality of the creator behind it. Am I clear on this point? Put your hand in the screen if you follow. Who is not understanding what I'm talking about? Be courageous. Raise your hand. Okay, Suresh, what's wrong? Tell me. What's your question?
I'm trying to understand God's purpose for doing what he does with Job. I know he's trying to challenge Job's faith and everything, and I was still lost with the accuser a little bit, so I just got confused right there.
You're still in the prologue, right? This is the God of the prologue. All of this, remember, this is just the author telling us how Job perceives God and how the ancients perceived God. So the whole dialogue with the accuser, this is how the people during Job's time perceived God. In the book, the author is trying to bring us to a different perception. Do you follow what I'm saying, Suresh?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, Milgram, you have a question about what I just said about what is happening with...
Sorry, I just never put my hand down. Sorry.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, so let me say that again so you can write it down, right? Behind all of this, so God, in a way, what he's doing, he's like a painter, right, in this text. He's sitting there and you can see him painting the cosmos, right? He paints the stars and the seas and the heavens and the earth, and then he's throwing all these wild animals, and they're, you know, so far and exciting and dangerous and powerful, right? So he's doing this painting, right? So the painting is the way I'm going to read this is to read the painting as telling me something about who God is. In other words, behind the creation, you have emerging a portrait of the Creator. And so as we enter this painting and describe the painting, we'll get a sense of the God that is revealing himself through this landscape. Okay, everybody clear? Hands in the screen? Okay, so let's go to the landscape. I'm going to just randomly read a part of it. And I want you to jot down as I'm reading. How does it make you feel? What are some adjectives you can give here about what I am describing? Okay, so I'm going to just randomly open to, I guess I'll start at the beginning. I'll just read a little bit. I want you to just listen and write down what is the atmosphere? What are some adjectives? How would you describe what's going on? What are some adjectives you can write down about what I'm talking about, right? How does it make you feel, what I'm reading? Okay, so God begins. Where were you when I planned the earth? Tell me if you're so wise, right? Do you know who took its dimensions? Were you there when I stopped the waters? Have you ever commanded the morning? Have you walked through the depths of the ocean? Have you seen the road to light? Do you hunt game for the lioness and feed her ravenous cubs? Does the rain have a father? Who unties the wild donkey and lets him wander at will? Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Do you give the horse his strength? Okay, so you have a few animals are described, some landscapes. What are some words you can give me that illustrate the general atmosphere or the personality of, the general atmosphere? Let me see if you can. So he's describing some animals, he's describing, what is the feeling you're getting? How do you feel as you're reading this text? Suresh, go ahead.
God is teasing Job by describing all the animals that he has to look forward to. He doesn't have to look at just Job himself.
Okay, so first of all, right, we get a sense of expansion, right? In other words, God seems to be saying, expand your mind, Job. There's not just you in the universe. There's all of this, right? So first of all, let me write this down, right? We have an expansion going on, for sure. We have to see where the expansion is going, but we have this going on. God, in a way, is broadening Job's perspective. Now, we don't know yet why and what he's going to show him or teach him, but certainly, very good, Suresh, we have an expansion. So what is God telling Job in this expanded consciousness that he's giving him? Rivera.
Well, I don't agree with like the delivery of how he's saying things, because I totally agree with I don't like how he said it. But when I read it, even though I didn't like it, it just sounded like he's telling Job to be grateful for the little things, because the little things, whether it be like how he created like the ocean and how nature works in its cycles, that it's the little things that are the blessings in life, like being able to, for all those things to exist. It also connects with how he's able to, when he had his animals, that's how they worked, that's how they did what they did, and he created the ability for him to have a good life. It sounds like the way that I've heard it.
Okay, you're close, you're very close. Definitely there is an invitation there, right? Now, what kind of invitation? How would you describe the types of animals that God is talking about? Is he talking about chickens? Is he talking about, sheep? What kind of animals are in this landscape that God is depicting? Are they tame animals? Are they domesticated animals? Wilkes, go ahead.
Well, I had an answer for your previous question about the expansion, and can I?
Yes.
So the way that I interpreted that, and the whole idea of the expansion was, I think the lesson that he wanted to teach Job was, you should have faith without having fear in me. If you fear so much that I can do all these bad things to you, why can't you expand your mind for the good things and for the better things? Like if I'm clearly this powerful, like I'm speaking in like in terms of like God, if I'm this powerful, why can't you believe that I'm powerful enough to give you good things? And kind of just to like hold on to his faith in that aspect.
Okay, yes, you're so close, right? In other words, we have an expansion, and it's an expansion onto, in a way, life itself, right? It's as though God is inviting Job into, look around you, look at everything that exists, look at how broad life is. Why are you living in such a narrow space? This is what God is saying in this first, right? When he's doing the expansion. Let me say it again, right? God, it's as though God is inviting Job into the circle of life. He's saying, look, the trees, the animals, the heavens, the earth, the depths of the ocean, the wild donkey. Life is so broad. Life is so vast. Life is so beautiful and scary at the same time, right? It's both scary and beautiful, right? When you read these descriptions, you have wild animals that are scary, like the Leviathan, like the lion, right? But you also have this beauty, right? So it's as though God is inviting Job to expand his consciousness, and God is telling Job, why are you living in such a narrow space, thinking only about sin and mistakes, and oh my goodness, what if I did this wrong, and let me not do this wrong, and let me just not enter life, let me just stay in this little jail, right, of righteousness. Do you see what I'm saying? This is so powerful, and I just really want you to get this because this is so powerful what's going on here. We are so used to thinking of God as this kind of accountant who is just looking at our mistakes, and we are so used to thinking of ourselves as scared to death, especially for believers. We're scared to death to make a mistake, to make a sin, and so in a way we become scared to death to live. We are afraid. If you are really, there are many believers, right, who believe in God, in the God of the prologue, who are afraid to live because they are afraid to take risks. They are afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to sin. And so they stay in a very narrow, confined space of purity. I'm not going to touch this. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to, right? I'm not going to go with these people. I'm not going to do this because, then I might sin, God forbid. And it's as though God is shattering this and saying, I'm not this. This is not who I am. This legalistic God, like an accountant looking at your sins. I'm out here, right? Do you feel me? I'm out here inviting you to come out of your narrow, religious, pious state and to live, right? By the way, remember this part, because this is exactly what Nietzsche, which we'll study in a few weeks, right? That's his criticism of religion. He says religion, it in a way, it imprisons us in this kind of jail of moral purity and this fear of life, right? Nietzsche is saying, is going to teach us, right, that in his perspective, religion is afraid of life. And so it's creating this little narrow space where we can live, right, imperfect, right, our perfect and pure lives, right? And it's as though the God of Job here, the God here in the discourse is saying, is exploding this, saying, I'm not there. This is not who I am. I am out here on the mountaintop in the depths of the ocean. I'm out here calling for you to come out of your narrow space and to not be afraid to live, to not be afraid to suffer, to not be afraid to enjoy, to not be afraid to even make a mistake, right? Does everyone understand this first point? Put your hand in the screen. Everybody? Critchell. Okay. All right. So this is the first thing that's going on, at least in my reading of the text, right? God is expanding Job's mind from moral purity to simply live. As though God is saying, stop worrying about making mistake or not, sinning or not. Enter life, live, breathe. It asphyxiates me to look at you, right? He's saying to Job. Okay, very good. Second thing, has to do with the wild animals. So let me write down in the chat, right? So number one, what we saw, right? So number one, expansion, as though God is saying, right, to Job, live. Don't be afraid to live, right? To suffer, oops, the stupid, to suffer, to make mistakes, to enjoy, to risk, right? This is really what's going on, right? He's saying to him, come out of your narrow state of moral purity, right? And live. Okay, that's in essence the first point. Now, the second point has to do with the type of animals. I've mentioned this before, right? Why does God mention only wild animals? Really, that's what's going on. We have the wild donkey, the wild ox, the wild horse, the wild ostrich, the wild antelope. We don't have chickens, we don't have ducks, we don't have cats, we don't have dogs, right? We have all these wild animals that are uncontrollable. What portrait of God are you getting through these images of wild animals that we cannot control? Let's see if you get that one. Yes, Rivera.
He's not trying to create living things that follow a strict form of faith or anything, like follow any sort of rule. It's like he lets them exist. He gives them the ability to purely exist. And like some of like the little details, like you hunt, you do things like instinctual things, but he doesn't tell you what to do. It's up to you to what you want to do. You have control over your life.
Okay, very good. I had a different interpretation in mind, but I love this one, right? The second thing we learn is that God is, in a way, creating a space for us to be wild, right? For us humans, right, to be wild. In other words, there are no prescriptions, right? It's really up to us, right? So I like that, Rivera. That's interesting. Absolutely. In a way, God wants us to be wild. He doesn't want us to be tame, right? Make sure, y'all make sure you're all muted, please. I don't have background noise. Thank you. Right? In a way, it's as though God is saying to Job, I want you to be wild. I don't want you to be tame and domesticated. You're too tame. You're too domesticated. You're always following the rules. You're always perfect. It wearies me to look at you, right? But it also says something about God. Remember, the Creator is reflected in the creation, right? So what does it say about God? All of these wild animals roaming around that you cannot control. What does it tell you about God? Let's see if any one of you gets it. Respler, go ahead.
I think it's the fact that he's not talking about like domesticated animals that like we can control. So I think it's also kind of like a little bit of like that haughty aspect of like, look, like I can control the wild animals, like I created them, like you can't. Like that's like within my domain.
Okay, almost, but look at it slightly different. Switch your lens a little bit. And the idea that the creation reflects the Creator, right? Not in the idea that God is trying to make a point. Right? How does the creation reflect the Creator when the creation is wild? That's the question.
Is it just that he's his own, like the same way that like animals don't like tend to somebody, they're not like owned by somebody else, like they kind of just like do their own thing, they hunt for themselves, they take care of themselves. Like God is saying like he doesn't have any creator, he doesn't have any like anybody that he has to like I don't know, like tend to, like in that sense, like
almost. Vargas, do you want to help Respler?
I thought in a different way. I thought that how wild animals are free. I thought in that sense that he doesn't have full control, like people who just control over you, not giving you that freedom. But he has given us that freedom. That's why he has given us the minds of our own to do whatever we want. Even though he is a creator, he has given us the freedom to do whatever we want.
Okay, so now you're close to Rivera, right? In a way, God in a way cannot control us, right? We are wild. So you guys are still with the creation. I love it how you guys are focusing on the creation, but is no one going to tell me how this creation reflects on God's nature? Respler was the closest so far. Respler almost got it. Aline, let's hear you.
Just like how God can't control, like predict his creations, we cannot predict God.
Finally.
I feel like this whole thing is like to realize there's like no rules to like the universe or anything that like happens to us. And I feel like Job like found like his bubble was popped, like almost like he realizes like he doesn't have control of everything that happens in his life. So maybe he should just let everything happen and then take day by day. Don't like nitpick everything because God doesn't do it, so you don't do it either.
Yes, excellent, right? Likewise, God cannot be controlled. And Job thought he could control God, right? This was the issue. Remember, Job was like, if I do this, then God will do this. If I do this, then God. Job, in a way, was controlling everything. He's a control freak. And it's as though God is saying, okay, you're a control freak, but I will not be manipulated and controlled by you. And what we're learning here is that God cannot be controlled. God is not someone we can manipulate to give us what we want and then stomp our feet with rage when he doesn't, right? Many of us, by the way, I want to stop on that a little bit, because many of us, we have these expectations of God. And when he doesn't fulfill these expectations, we get pissed. Yeah, how could God do this? And then we stop believing in him because he didn't respond to our expectations. What we're learning here is that God is not going to always fulfill your expectations. God, yes, God is there to take care of us, to comfort us, to protect us, but God is also there to challenge us, to break us out of our comfort zone, to enable our growth, right? God is not someone that will always cater to all your whims and desires, right? God sometimes says no. God sometimes challenges us, right? To bring us to a higher level, to a broader space, right? So instead of, stomping our feet with rage when God doesn't give us what we want and then declaring that God doesn't exist, right? Why not allow this wild God to be this wild being that sometimes will surprise us, shock us, challenge us? Do you see what I'm saying? Are we ready for such a God, right? This is not easy to be dealing with a God we don't know what he's going to do next. But you don't know if there's going to be a challenge or if there's going to be a surprise, right? Or both. Do you follow what I'm saying here in the second point? Let me see your hands in the screen. If you, okay. So let me write it down here in the chat, right? God cannot be controlled or manipulated, right? God is not just there to cater to us, right? He is also there to challenge us, right? I'm putting this in the chat, right? And sometimes he is there to jolt us, to shock us, right? To bring us out of our comfort zone. And that's what it means to be in touch, right, with a wild God. It means that it's an adventure. You don't know what's going to happen next. And I love the way Aline said, right, relinquish control and go with the flow. See where it takes you, right? This is in a way the only attitude to have when you don't have control. Just, surrender, go with the flow. Don't be afraid, right, to let go. And just allow whatever comes into your life to come into your life. Because whatever is coming into your life, we'll see, and this is my third point, is going to be life-giving instead of death-giving. So this brings me to my last point, which I'm going to say myself because we have no time. And this is the notion that instead of a death-giving God, right, of a death-giving God, right, the God who kills the children, right, as one of you complained about, right, this is the God of the prologue. We have here a God who is, as creator, right, the source of life. This whole text, this whole discourse is infused with life. You have so much life. As I read this text, I get the sense of a powerful wind, right, a powerful breath coming out of the text. It's very, when you read with the rhythm and you read the poetry and you read kind of these, gorgeous animals and this rhythm, right? You get a sense that there is so much life in this text, right? There's so much birth right? If you look, so many animals are giving birth in this text, right? You have so much aliveness. You have so many references to springtime, to renewal. It's as though God is saying, you thought I was the God of death, but I am the God of life. I am the one who makes you stand up. I'm not the one who only crushes you. If I crush you, it is to enable you to stand up better, right? Let me say that again, right? So in other words, what God is saying is that, yes, I crushed you, but I crushed you so that you might resurrect a better version of yourself. I crushed you to give you new life. Let me say that again, because this is a powerful lesson which we can apply to any type of suffering, right? God crushes in order to recreate a new person, new beginning, better Job, right? Job of the prologue is nothing like the Job that we meet now, right? It's as though God crushed in order to recreate, right? He brings Job back to dust so that he can mold him again into the person that he has become, right? This is life, right? Suffering in the worldview of this text, any suffering we go through is a prelude to a new life. Any death we go through is a prelude to resurrection. That's the idea that we're getting here in the text, right? Anytime we suffer, it is for the sake of new life, right? This is the sense I'm getting from the text, which just is oozing with life. There's so much a pulse in this text, right? Are you following what I'm saying? This is so hard to explain. Are you getting what I'm saying? Put your hand in the screen. Who is confused what I just said right now? Who is still confused? Nobody, really? We'll see. We'll see in the test. But okay, very good. So that's the last thing I want to write down, right? We thought instead of a death-giving God, we have a God who is as creator, the source of life. We have a God, right, who uses suffering to create new life. I think this is really one of the main lessons of the book of Job, right? He crushes in order to resurrect anew, right? Or to recreate us, right? In other words, in order for God to reshape us, we have to first become dust again, right? And suffering allows this to happen in our lives. When we suffer, I don't know if you remember the last time you suffered, you were probably nothing to look at, right? You were feeling like your whole life had dissolved, right? You were like dust. And it's at that moment that the Creator can reshape us into a better version of ourselves, if we allow it, right? Many times when we suffer, there are two roads. There's the road of bitterness and denial and anger, but there's also the road of becoming a better version of ourselves, right? And if we allow it, any type of suffering will do this work in us, right? We will emerge from that suffering, like Job, a better version of ourselves, right? So suffering as a prelude, right? Suffering as a prelude to new life, or death as a prelude to resurrection, right? Okay, so hopefully you guys got the gist of what I'm saying. Do you think you're ready to answer what revelation of God we have here? What is this new, right? You can see the contrast between the God of the prologue and the God that is kind of emerging here in this discourse. Do you see what I'm saying? Put your hand if you're seeing more clearly. I see a couple hands. Vargas, Milgram, and Hartstart. Go ahead.
When you talk about God, like when God crushes us, it's to recreate. Is it? Do you mean the process? Like when we are at our low, we learn from it and then we come out, or is it the incident that happened? Like if someone dies, and does it have meaning to it, or is it the process that we get out? I don't know how to get my question, but like, is it the incident that's what matters, or the process that helps us to get up from our low to a high?
The process, the first thing you said, right? That the suffering helps us, right, to become better versions of ourselves, right? This is one of the lessons of the book of Job, in my view, that suffering, it can be it becomes in this text a prelude to our own resurrection. That's how this text seems to be interpreting suffering. So I agree with you, Verghese. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
I'm going to go a little over today, so I'll record it in case some of you have to go, but I'm going to go a little over so I can finish and hear your questions and also finish the epilogue. Okay, let's see. Milgram, go ahead, and then Harkstark.
I have a question. So, I really like this interpretation, but I also just like have a question that's like bothering like me inside my head about it. It kind of seems like this interpretation is kind of saying that like people, like God kind of favors people who suffer / like God makes the people that he likes more suffer, because if you're going to say that like suffering brings about like all these positive things, like there are people in the world who like I mean, I guess you can argue that everyone suffers to an extent, but like there are people in the world that suffer way more than other people, and some people who just like naturally have like easier lives. So how is that like reconciled exactly? Like what about people who don't really suffer? Like what is their relationship with God then?
Okay, good. Let me bring Nietzsche in to respond to you. Nietzsche said something that happiness is not comfortableness. Okay, so this is a quote by Nietzsche. Let me write his name, which we'll study in a few weeks, right? In other words, for Nietzsche, comfortableness, meaning you're happy, you have a nice little house, you have everything going right? For him, that's not true happiness. True happiness is having experienced the ecstasies as well as the abysses of life, right? The heights and the depths. If you've entered life to that degree, where you've tasted the mountaintop and you've tasted the abyss, right? That's happiness. That's a life well lived. So here we don't have God saying you should be, in a little prison or carrying your cross, you should. No, God is saying live, and live entails suffering, but it also entails ecstasy, right? That I think is the God that is being described here. He's not just saying suffer, right? He's saying, don't be afraid to also suffer, right? You should live and enjoy your life and have your children and have your wealth, right? This is part of the ecstasies, but the depth of life is what you were missing. Life is both. Don't be afraid to enter into life fully. Job was comfortable in the Nietzschean sense, and God now is saying, I want you to be happy, meaning live life fully, right? So the book here is not saying suffering is the virtue. The book is saying life is the virtue. And life means height and depth, sorrow and joy, right? And that's what I think is being said here. Milgram, does that answer your question?
Yeah, not like 100%, but yeah.
What's the percent that's missing?
Like, I mean, I didn't think that like, I mean, I understand that like people should go through both. I just like, it's still like if you have someone who, like, it still sounds like someone who doesn't really suffer is like less of a priority to God. And like that's the piece. Like I understand like the suffering and the having a good life piece, but like, and my question is more for like the people who don't really suffer.
Okay, so remember, you're saying someone who doesn't suffer is less of a priority, but when God first meets Job, what kind of man is he? Is he suffering?
No.
Job is comfortable. And yet God is like, you. I'm gonna get you out of that, right? So it's not that God privileges those who suffer, right? Because God is actually has his eye on Job before Job suffered, right? And then he brings him into this deeper experience, right? So God, in a way, is interested in Job, even though Job is not a very, quote unquote, interesting person, right? Or, of course he's interesting, but it's not because he's suffering that God loves him, because he loves him before the suffering. And it's because he loves him, one might argue, that he brings him into this experience. Does that make sense, Milgram, a little more?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Harkstark, go ahead, Harkstark. I see your hand.
So we haven't really acknowledged the significance of the epilogue.
I'm getting
Um,
there. I'm getting there.
Okay, so okay.
I'm
Fine.
just getting the last questions. I'm going to the epilogue. Are we good? Let me make sure everybody gets. Are there any more questions, like Milgram had, right, to clarify this new vision of God, right, that is being given? Are there any more questions on that? Everyone good? Okay, let's go to the epilogue. Okay, so the epilogue, as a lot of you mentioned, right, seems deeply problematic, right? And the main reason is this, that in the epilogue, we have Job getting everything back, right? Now, what is the problem with that? Some of you wrote about this, so you know. What is the problem with Job getting everything back? I mean, on the one hand, it's reassuring that, oh, okay, God will, in the end, he rewards the faithful. But remember, this is wisdom literature. We cannot have such a simplistic reading. So Wilkes, tell us, what is going on? What's problematic about it? Go ahead.
I was so confused because in my interpretation, I thought like a part of Job's spiritual awakening was going to be him surpassing the point of materialism just for him to get everything back. So I was confused. I still don't understand that.
Excellent. You noticed, right? What is this that he's getting everything back? In a way, we're back at square one, where Job was in it for the money, right? And so we know from our analysis of the prologue and all that Job went through, that this can't be the real happy ending. If there is a happy ending, this cannot be it. Am I clear on that, at least? Put your hand in the screen. Right? Remember, both the prologue and the epilogue, the author is making fun of something, right? So here, I believe he's making fun of this view that in the end, God eventually will bless you because you've been a good person, right? Which Job hasn't been, by the way, right? In terms of religiosity, right? So we know already that the author here is being ironic, right? In fact, look at the way the author writes this, right? Go to page 91 with me. Everybody there on page 91, put your hand in the screen. Okay, so look how it's dripping with irony. Then the Lord returned all Job's possessions and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his relatives and everyone who had known him came to his house to celebrate. And as they left, each one gave him a coin or a gold ring. So the Lord blessed the end of Job's life more than the beginning. And then you have another list, like the prologue, 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke, and we're back to square one. And clearly it's as though nothing had happened. And so here my interpretation here is that the author is making fun of this view, right? Everybody gets that? Do you see the irony? Put your hand in the screen if you're seeing what I'm saying, right?
He's making. You said the line you said before. You kind of said it kind of fast. Can you repeat that one more time? You said something.
What did I say?
I'm so sorry.
I said that it's dripping with irony, that he's making fun of the point of view that if you do good, ultimately you'll be blessed, right? And that in a way, this can't be the real meaning, since that brings us back to square one. Am I making sense, Leon?
Yeah. Now you make, yeah.
Okay, so we have to seek for the happy ending elsewhere. And it's there, he puts something else. He's adding something in the epilogue which gives us a glimpse into the real happy ending. Can anyone see it? It's an interesting detail, which most people ignore, but which opens up everything about what is the real happy ending. What is the interesting detail, which is not the same as in the prologue? What's the shift, which gives us a sense of who Job has become? It's a detail which gives us a sense of who Job now is. Subankulova, go ahead.
Is it that he shares all of his possessions with along with the brothers? And
very good, very good. I'm going to comment on that. Cruz, do you want to add before I do that?
I was going to say the same thing, but it's fine.
Okay, very good, excellent, right? Notice the difference. Go to the third paragraph, right? Right after all the list, right, of oxen and donkeys. He also had 7 sons, 3 daughters, and then you have two things very strange going on. He names his daughters, and I know in English it looks weird, but in Hebrew it sounds very nice. So he names his daughters, which is unusual. In general, if you know the Hebrew Bible, women don't get names. If you have a genealogy, it's only the men, right? Occasionally one woman, very spectacular woman, right? But here, instead of naming the sons, he names the women, the daughters, and then he does something unheard of in biblical culture. He gives them a share of his possessions. Normally the women did not inherit in biblical culture, right? It's a patriarchal culture. Women don't inherit. They get married and they go with their husband or their father, but they don't have their own land. So what do these two details tell you about who Job has become? Through his journey, through his ordeal, he emerges into the kind of man that will name his daughters and give them possessions. What does this tell you about Job? Aline, go ahead.
So I feel like it's like a very like stereotypically like masculine thing to like want to have like control over every little thing that like happens. So he like becomes like the shift from like talking about like mainly his sons to like giving so much emphasis on his daughter. Like he touches into like a feminine side almost, where he gives up control. Like he doesn't care about having control over everything, if that makes sense. So yes.
I like that very much. This idea of Job tapping into his feminine side. Let me write it down. I can't write feminine side, right? In other words, he's losing his hyper masculinity, right? Patriarchal, kind of controlling. Oh my God, I can't write patriarchal. The computer is correcting it. Patriarchal, kind of controlling personality, right? And he's becoming more of this sensitive, kind of, attuned to the other, right? Because women usually were ignored, they didn't exist. And all of a sudden now his attention is focused on them. So he's able to see things he didn't see before. This is another thing, right, that we can add, right? He sees what he didn't see before. His perception in a way is broadened. Right today because I'm in a hurry. Right, very good. I like that. There was a couple more. There was Milgram and then Cruz. Go ahead.
It also seems like he's doing exactly what you described God wants him to do, like in the sense that like God wants Job to just live and to get out of like this narrow religious like confined space, and by like deliberately doing something in which the Bible like does not talk about, and he's kind of like carving his own path, and that's like his version of living and not necessarily like staying in his confined box.
Very good. I like that a lot. So I'm writing down Job carves his own path. He leaves behind social conventions, right? He's able now, his view has expanded, right? By the way, this is what suffering will do to us, right? It will expand our view. It will make us see what we didn't see before, right? This is part of this resurrection, right? It will make us tap into a different side of ourselves, right? These are all of the richness of living life fully, right? Okay, Cruz, want to add? Go ahead, Cruz.
So I was going to say the same thing as everyone else said, and that he's technically just breaking down the typical ideas or stereotypes that someone would have. He's being rebellious, something that God wanted him to do.
Yes, rebellion, absolutely. Yes, now finally Job is kind of being a little wild, right? Anti-conventional, finally original, creative, right? Whereas before he was like this, So we're seeing Job in a way come alive, right? What else does it tell you when a man is able to see the women around him? What does this tell you about the state of his heart? Beyond him being rebellious. What else does it tell you? That he notices the women that he didn't notice before and gives them and is caring enough to give them a share of the inheritance. What does it tell you about how his heart has changed? Anybody know? Okay, Leon, go ahead.
You say like he fell in love with somebody, like his wife? Like he's a family man.
No, I'm not saying that. There's no.
I mean, he has a daughter, so I'm assuming he has a wife, right?
Okay, so are you saying that he's? But I need elements in the text to tell me that he's fallen in love with his wife again, because I don't see
too many stuff from the other class I'm taking and adding it here.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Nice try, Leon. Rivera, would you like to help Leon?
The way that I see it is he probably it kind of connects to rebelliousness, but in the sense of from the conversation he had with God, he values life as life and not by just like gender or anything like that. Like that's his family, that's another life. I'm gonna give what I was blessed with to them because that is part of my family, but it's also another living being. It's not just a woman or just whatever preconceived notions you have. It's a life.
Very good, right? He's able to see the others that he didn't see before, right? In a way, he's able to feel empathy, compassion with the woman that before was treated like, possession that you move around, right? From the father to the husband, right? So now he's seeing them as subjects. He's empathizing with their vulnerability, right? He becomes more compassionate. So we see that too, right? This is also something that has shifted in Job, right? Excellent. Anything else that has shifted in Job that you're seeing in this passage that you want to add? Okay, good. So this is really what we're learning from this text, I think, is the key to suffering, right? It is a text about suffering, right? And it is a text that has a lot of questions that in a way remain unanswered. Is true, right? God doesn't really answer Job clearly, right? But what we're seeing is also the journey of suffering, where it can lead, right? And I think this is for me the value of this text, even though it doesn't answer the theological questions of why do we suffer, who brings the suffering, and so forth, right? It does chart the journey that we could have into new life through the dark times of our lives, right? And this is, I think, the value of the book. It charts. It's like a navigational, it's a compass, right? It's telling us how suffering, in a way, losing everything, can bring us into this new life, right? Of being transformed, changed, tapping into a different side, seeing what we don't see, compassion, becoming more creative, more alive, right? This is really where suffering can lead if we allow it to, if we relinquish control, right? Rivera, do you want to add?
I just have a question. And like, while I understand the growth of Job, and that's great, my main problem with the epilogue is the fact that he punishes his friends because of how they viewed God, which is, I understand, but at the same time, that's what they were taught. It's a preconceived notion through being taught. So like, while the only reason why Job was angry was because he was suffering, but at the same time, God literally spoke to him himself to teach him. But then he's punishing the other men who never even got to talk to him. They're just repeating what they're taught. Why is that fair? I don't understand that. That's the part that I'm lost.
Yes. So a lot of you asked that question, right? So this is, I think that section is typical of wisdom literature. This is the author's way of saying, right, that God prefers a questioning mind than a conforming mind. I think that's what's going on, right? Remember, don't take it literally that God, I mean, it's not that God is being unfair, or of course it looks like that, but look at what is being taught, right? What we're learning is that God seems to prefer a questioning, doubting, angry mind to a conforming, kind of, docile, submissive mindset. That's the lesson, right? God is saying, basically the author is telling us through this little scene, which is invented. The whole book of Job is invented, by the way, right? This is a story, right? It's not like actually happened, right? What he's showing us through this scene is the way that God is more is more closely connected to Job because he was able to question and doubt, and he's more loosely connected to the friends because they didn't go deep enough in their questions. They were too submissive, too docile. Does that make sense, Rivera?
It does. Sorry, I couldn't press the button. Yeah,
Okay,
it
good.
makes sense.
Right? Remember, this whole book is a story, right? Don't go around taking things literally, right? The author is kind of like a play, right? That is supposed to teach us certain things about who God is and what suffering, right? How to navigate suffering, how to be a human being, right? So don't be like, oh, why would God? This is a story, right? And I want to be clear. I'm not saying the rest of the Bible is a story, right? There are elements in the Bible that are historical and that have happened, but there are moments in the Bible like this one where people tell stories, right? Like the book of Jonah or this book or the book of Esther, right? These are stories meant to teach us something, right? So that's what we're learning from that section. Okay, any other question you want to clarify about the book of Job before we conclude? Now's your moment. Anything that is still loose ends that are still not tied from your reading assignments that you want to clarify, now's your moment. We have a little time. All clear? Okay, so you have, let me not stop the recording and continue. You have a test coming up this weekend. So let's talk briefly about that. I'm sorry to take so long. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. I don't know. This never happens. I don't know. Because it's such a difficult, I wanted you to get it. Okay, so the test, in your syllabus, you have two, I believe. Let me check. You have two questions. Right? Did God answer Job? And if so, how? This, you base yourself on today's lecture, right? The response of God, his discourse. Do you feel like, and it's not opinion, you put whatever we said in class, you put in it. Don't go around saying, I don't think no, right? I don't care about your opinion. You can put it, but then you have to add everything that we talked about. So make sure you put as much as possible of what we talked about today in that answer. If God answered Job, you can say no, but then you have to also say yes and how, right? What did I say? How did I argue for what I said, right? And then, does the book of Job have a happy ending? And if so, what is it? This is also today, right? The epilogue. Is it a happy ending? What's the real happy ending? What's the false one? Talk to me about that, right? And so to get a good grade on the test, remember, you need to write a whole page. Let me write this in the chat, right? You need to have one page, single-spaced. You need to have as much of the lecture as possible. Right, I'm looking there, really the goal of the test is me seeing how good you take notes. So you want to put in as much as possible, all the details, right? It's kind of a dumb exercise, the test. It's just your notes into the test, right? And then finally you need quotes, right? So I didn't give you too many quotes on what I said. You have to look for them a little bit, right? Whatever you're going to answer, if you're going to talk about God being wild, right? You need to have a quote, boom, from the text where this is what you're supporting your answer based on the text, right? So you do this for each, so it's one page per question, right? So 2 pages total, right? That you put into my folder by Saturday night midnight. And be careful, if you're late, it's okay, you only lose 1 point, but you lose 1 point, right? So don't be late when you hand in the test. Now I grade the test Sunday morning. Maybe during the night you want to hand it in, I don't care. You want to hand it in at 6 a.m. when I'm sleeping, you can do that. But when I get to that folder on Sunday morning, it all has to be there, right? Okay, your second assignment is the essay. And the essay is simply, remember I told you, this is your spiritual journey. So you tell me a little bit about where you are right now. In other words, for this exercise, for the essay, I want you to go back to all of those questions you used to have, right? About God, about what religion, should I stay, should I leave, right? Am I an atheist, am I a believer, right? At one point, all of us had these questions, and then we kind of like put them on the back burner because we were busy with life, right? I want you to go back to those questions, right? Where are you spiritually? Where did you start out as a child, and what led you to where you are now? Were you a Christian and now you're an atheist? Why? Were you a Buddhist and now you're a Jew? Why? Right? Tell me your journey. And then, second thing in the essay, is there anything in what we read that really struck a chord, that really connects to your journey somehow, and you tell me about that? Okay, so the essay has two components. It's where are you right now spiritually? How did you get there, right? And is there anything in what we read that struck a chord, right? That you feel is connecting to your journey, right? It can be negatively or positively. I don't care. You can write a hate thing. That's cool. Right? So so this is 1.5 pages, single spaced. Right? Make sure it's a full 1.5 pages, and don't give me like half a page with the title and your name and stuff. You start at the top of the page and you finish in the middle of the next page, right? So and you can write anything you want. You can write a journal entry, you can write a letter to yourself, you can, very fluid. I don't care how you write it, as long as you're doing those two things, right? Any questions? Rivera, go ahead.
That was old. That's not real.
Okay, great.
So I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
For the quotations, I'm using a PDF document of the book. So am I putting like the verse, or am I
the verse is good.
The verse?
That's
okay.
fine. Yeah,
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm warning you, by the way, first test in my classes is always a catastrophe. Just so you know, average is always C-, so you're prepared. Knowing that, try to do the best you can, right? But usually it's always a shock because people don't know how to write essay tests and you don't really know what I want. Eventually you'll get it, so don't be afraid, right? This test is always the worst one. Whatever grade you get, you're probably in the class average. Okay, any questions on the test or the essay? And you know how to prepare? Okay, go ahead, Milgram.
What makes it so hard for us?
I don't know. I think people don't know how to take notes until they have this moment where they realize my notes suck and I have to do better. I think it's a question of note taking. People are not used to taking down every detail, which in this class you need to do. That's right. Every word coming out of my mouth should be on your paper. It's an issue, I think, of note taking. So if you're taking good notes, you should be fine. Aline, you have a question?
Oh, you guys were just like talking about the citation. So like, how do you cite a verse? Like my PDF doesn't like show any like numbers or anything. So like,
just cite it. It's okay. I'll see if it's from there. I know the book, so it's okay. If you don't have any references, just cite a little bit and then that's it. Yes. Any other questions? Suboglova, go ahead.
Okay, so the notes, what if we use some of the exact words?
Oops.
Wouldn't count as plagiarism?
If you use exact words of who?
The words that you use.
No, it's not plagiarism.
No,
because it's the content. It's plagiarism if you're writing from someone else's, or if you're copying from the internet or from another book. If it's coming from my mouth, it's not plagiarism. You can write all the sentences coming out of my mouth. You're good, no worries. Okay, so you notice I give you a lot of time to do the test each time because there's a review session for Seek. So no class this Thursday, right? You have time to prepare for this, so you shouldn't have a late test because you have a lot of time. Okay, so the rest of you can go, and I just need my Seek students to stay behind so we can talk about the review session. The rest of you, you're free to go. Enjoy your weekend, have a good test, and remember, on next Tuesday, we have an introduction to Maimonides, so no reading assignment. All right, guys, I'll see you. Bye, everybody.
If I'm not in Seek, can I still join that session or no?
You're not Seek? You want to join the session?
As in, like, you said you're going to do a review, so if there's anything that didn't make any sense, would I still be able